Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's continuation of the council meeting. So I think you probably do remember all the housekeeping comments because we made them at the start of the last meeting. So shall I take those as read? Yeah. Before we start this meeting, let us hold a minute of silence in memory of John Scotty Fraser, who represented Upper Hale as a Farnham resident councillor on both Waverley Borough and Farnham Town Councils between 2015 and 2019, and who continued to serve on Farnham Town Council between 2019 and 2023. And let us remember too, the great Jessie Jackson. So let us stand. May they rest in peace and rise in glory. Thank you. And before we start, I would also like to place on record my thanks to Katie and to Kim and to David Copping for their help with the Mayor's Valentine quiz. And I'd like to thank those in this room who attended it. And together we raised £2,395 for the Meath and Skilway. Thank you. And on Tuesday of next week, we have another opportunity to get together as a Waverley Borough Council, 9:30 on Tuesday outside this office to raise the flag and for a short time of reflection to recognise the 4 years of war in Ukraine. So it'd be lovely to see you all there. Agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Are there any?
We have apologies for absence from Councillor Michael Higgins, Councillor Rubini, Councillor Jackie Keane, Councillor Jerome Davidson, Councillor Maxine Gale, Councillor Peter Clark, Councillor Carol Coburn, Councillor Peter Nicholson, Councillor Laura Cavalieri, Councillor Alan Earwaker, Councillor Graham White, Councillor Michaela Wicks and Councillor Andrew Lawton. Are there any other apologies? Councillor Austin.
Yeah, Councillor Goodridge has sent his apologies. Councillor Atkins, Councillor Raleen, Councillor Staunton. Am I missing any others? No, thank you.
And Madam Mayor, I believe Councillor Crowe has also given her apologies.
Are there any other apologies? Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any? No. So we come to agenda item number 3, financial monitoring of 2025-2026, quarter 2. Are there any questions on clarity before we start? No. Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So hopefully I'll be quick. This report asks us just to note.
Do you have a second?
Oh yeah, I need a seconder. Can I go? There we are.
Please, the second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Right. So we're just noting the quarter 2 financial monitoring report, which forecasts the full year outturn for the year against the approved budget based on the experience of the first 6 months to 30th of September 25. Now, that kind of seems like a lifetime ago, but the governance journey for this report started over a month ago with the 13th of January executive and was supposed to finish on the 27th of January, but was deferred until this meeting. So substantively, on the revenue side, and starting with our general fund, we're forecasting a full year underspend of around £452,000 against the approved budget. And as we've discussed before, the single largest driver of this is the underspend from prolonged or unfilled staffing vacancies. The supply of suitable staff is a nationally recognised problem in our sector, where it routinely takes longer to fill vacant posts and where we often have to resort to more expensive agency staff at the points of most stress. And our staff vacancy savings are net of those higher rate agency costs. Still on the revenue side, our housing revenue account is also forecasting a full year underspend of around about £933,000, also due largely to staff vacancy savings, plus underspends on budgeted repairs and utilities as well. Turning briefly to capital, the report shows forecast slippage of around about £2 million in the general fund capital programme and 1.7 million in the HRA programme. These variances largely reflect project phasing, procurement delays and timing issues, rather than the cancellation or withdrawal of schemes, and the relevant budgets will be carried forward where appropriate. Members will also see detailed updates on reserves and debt. Our reserves remain strong and continue to provide resilience against financial risk and volatility, including the financial stress of transitioning to the new unitary. And this is something I'll return to when we discuss the proposed budget next week. But in the meantime, this update report was also considered by overview and scrutiny on the 26th of January on the same agenda as the draft 26-27 budget, and contributed in part to some of the recommendations which I need to start considering now. Specific to staff vacancy savings, I'd actually beg to differ with the ONS that these arise from savings in headcount. We budget for specific staff roles, and they are tested during the annual budget challenge board round. These vacancy savings are timing differences that arise from unwanted delays in filling vacant posts in the budgeted headcount. In this report, those forecast savings are also as estimated only at the halfway point through a financial year that still hasn't actually finished. On a non-financial level, the vacancy savings are not sustainable in the long term and certainly do not reflect reduced service need. Recruitment in these budgeted posts remains a priority, and we're actively working on different ways to reach and attract more applicants. But in fact, we do already pre-budget for some staff vacancy savings, and for this current year, 25-26, that was £200,000. And indeed, based partly on the indications in this report, our current draft budget proposal is to increase that figure to £246,000. So while it may not be unreasonable to speculate whether we should be budgeting for an even higher level of staff vacancy savings next year and beyond that, we believe that it is too early to predict that with sufficient certainty. We've also noted ONS's first preference to use any spare budget capacity that may emerge to reduce the council tax rise. For an individual Band D household, even a total freeze in Waverley's council tax next year will be worth around 12 pence a week. But if we had the capacity, we'd also have to consider that there may be other more effective and more efficient ways to return value to the council taxpayer collectively. Just one example, Councillor Murray has quite rightly pointed out that using any surplus to better attract, retain and motivate our staff could do just that. And those are just some of the knowns, and there are others, but we also have to assess the risk of unknowns. Just two examples, inflation has become reliably unreliable. And we know also that we are, frankly, guinea pigs in this uniquely accelerated LGR process, which is a whole new world of risk all of its own. And so finally, while the recommendation is to note this report, I'd really like to emphasise once again the actual wording of the officer's report in Appendix 9, the Treasury Management Mid-Year Review, and specifically the wording from officers on the theoretical interest earned from SIL funds, which does seem to be occasionally misunderstood, if not miscommunicated. The wording of that officer's report is particularly considered and objective, and I'd really encourage members to specifically note that. And on that note, I will recommend the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Follows, do you reserve your right to
I
speak?
do indeed reserve my right.
You do. So are there any speakers? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to note that the ONS committee in December reviewed this particular quarterly performance report. It wasn't reviewed at the budget ONS, although we referred to it. Madam Mayor, I do note the anticipated general fund surplus, which is estimated at £451.6 thousand at the end of this financial year. I also understand from officers that the surplus will almost certainly be greater than that, perhaps 500,000. And I would probably put my money on it being more than that. We've already heard from the portfolio holder that most of the savings are driven by staffing, establishment, underspend. Now, the nearly £500,000 of underspend is a very considerable sum of money. It's equivalent to some 4% of council tax. The administration proposed to move this to reserves to carry forward to the 2026-27 financial year. I have to say I would prefer to see this surplus returned to the Waverley Council taxpayer rather than to bolster the balance sheet, which will then be transferred to the West Surrey Council. But I don't intend to pursue that now. That's something that I'm sure that we will return to in next week's full council on the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beeman.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I mean, when you employ agency staff at higher rates, you wouldn't expect an underspend on budget, on your employment budget. But as a matter of interest, how many of our staff, full-time equivalent, are on agency basis at the moment? Do we know?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that if that's okay. Yes, we do. Can I give that to you offline? This report is only to note it, but I would like to double check a number before I give it to you. But yes.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you. Just I wasn't sure we were having a Q&A session or where we were in a budget meeting. Sorry, you know, what meeting are we in? Because actually, Councillor Merriweather has just responded talking about recommendations which we made on the budget, not on this agenda item. And I think that was worth clarifying. I think Councillor Martin said everything else I wanted to say.
Thank you. Councillor Kenreid.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't going to speak, but it always amazes me when someone comes forward and suggests that an underspend on staffing resources which are actually needed to deliver the services we provide to our residents suggests that we hand the money back. I didn't hear how he wanted to hand the money back, but let's assume that we say, well, we won't give an increase in our council tax this year. All of those things carry forward to following years and put us on the back foot to deliver the services which our residents demand. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you. Just like to say that in that respect, this is the last budget of Waverley Borough Council. I think we all understand that. So there aren't any problems in future years for us. There are elements, our that those of us who have been around for a long time know that there is always an underspend every year. There is always an underspend on budget. It's very often to do with staffing. We've got different consideration this time round, of course, because we don't really know exactly how much money we're going to need to spend on staffing over the coming year because of LGR and other matters. But it isn't unreasonable, I wouldn't have thought, and I can't imagine anybody else would consider it totally unreasonable, for us to consider that the underspend that is always there in this final year, we shouldn't necessarily let that money, you know, we could allow that money to be spent because we know it's going to happen. And there's no reason why we have to pass on to Woking excessive amounts of money just simply because we're effectively over budgeting. We always do. We always have to over budget. You know, we're grown ups. We understand that if the council and officers turn around and say, "Oh, we've got loads and loads of money," then 50 members are all going to turn around and say, "So spend it in my ward." We're never told that we've got plenty of money. We haven't been for past 20 years. I've been watching the budget of Waverley. I've never seen it admitted that we've got money to spend. We're always really tight. But in this final year, I think you know, we should at least reward residents for having put up with us for all these years, and where possible, perhaps allow them to have a bit back. But we'll see. I'm not proposing anything now, of course, but it isn't ridiculous for people to suggest that perhaps we shouldn't be quite so tight on residents as we have over previous years, because we certainly always do have an underspend. Thanks.
Thank you. No other speakers? Councillor Follows.
I'm only going to say a couple of bits. In the future, what we do in future years question is something that's come up in other places. And I would just remind everybody that we always have to act responsibly. I had the same issue with Surrey, who decided not to publish an MTFS until effectively forced to do so, at which point you saw where the irresponsibility lied, and it was hidden in years 2, 3 and 4. It is also nice to see members of the opposition now finally concerned about exposure to the unitary balance sheet. It's a shame it was not when it actually mattered. Something I just want to put, though, in people's brains for the budget discussions, obviously, next week. One of the things that the unitarisation process exposes us to is council tax harmonisation. Now, at the moment, Guildford and Waverley are approximately at the median point, so we won't see a great hike probably in council tax. Fees and charges, different domain, that might be a different matter. But if you can imagine that if you don't, not only do you cause the issues that's been raised by members about building, and by Ken Reid in particular, and not building that budget into the future, you are also increasing the harmonisation gulf when it comes to council tax harmonisation. So whilst you might feel like you're protecting Waverley residents right now, you are potentially increasing the shock of harmonisation in the future. One of the things we have a responsibility when we know such shocks are coming is to smooth that shock as much as we can. And as a result, we would not be acting in that position by doing what's been suggested here, in my opinion. I will try and get further details on the council tax harmonisation elements prior to the budget, because I imagine that might be something that a few of you have questions on, as I've now made those comments. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'll hand back to the proposer.
Thank you, Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very grateful to my colleagues for reminding me that this was discussed in January and December. I'm a bit surprised that they don't appreciate me trying to respond to the concerns and the recommendations of ONS in a timely and transparent way. I'm very happy to respond to their recommendations without waiting and without delay, and that's what I'm trying to do. I hear Councillor Martin saying that he will bet his own money that the staff vacancy savings will recur in a year, but of course we're not here to bet money, and we're not here to bet council taxpayers' money or take risks on behalf of our council taxpayers. So I would want to take that with caution, and of course we can cherry pick any metric we like. The staff vacancy savings that we're talking about are less than 3% of our staff salary budget. And we have learned painfully that little changes in those variables, particularly inflation, can have big consequences for us. I certainly remember COVID, and I certainly remember the first years of the cost of living crisis, where small percentages in metrics that affected things like staff salary and contracted costs had such enormous changes. My point is that we are open to consider things like this at the right time for the collective benefit of our residents. But at the moment, I think it is too premature to bank any speculative savings. And even if we do, in the end, have these savings, they do crystallize. There are other collective uses for the money that may be of better value to our council taxpayers and to our residents than whatever it is, the 12p a week that they might get from a council tax freeze. That's all I'm saying. So I'm going to wrap it up there. We want to be prudent to respond to Councillor Hyman. We didn't get to be this way by being, dishing out the cash left, right and centre. We got this way. We got to be what is, I think, the strongest council in West Surrey financially by being prudent, by being responsible, by being a responsible council. And that's the way I'd like to leave it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have the recommendation that council resolves to note the Q2 financial monitoring report contained in Appendix 1 to 8 of this report. When lights show, please vote, remembering the one on the left, green, is for, the one on the right, red, is to oppose, and the one in the middle is
Can we just note by agreement, Chair?
Note. Happy with that?
Agreed.
Yep. Fine. Agenda item 4, proposed changes to public speaking rules. Are there any questions on this? No. Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to bring forward these recommendations to the Council on proposed changes to public speaking on behalf of now the joint Waverley and Guildford Standard Committee.
And
which,
do you have a seconder?
Pleased to second,
actually,
Madam
it's
Mayor.
normally Councillor Rabini,
Yeah.
but I noticed Councillor Williams is here, who's a member of the committee. So,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So if I can just explain very briefly before we get into discussion why these recommendations are coming forward. If you look on page 55 under 6.1 of your original papers, which are the ones I'm working from, it explains that the 3 separate parts of the Constitution deal with public speaking, planning committee rules, council procedure rules and public speaking procedure rules. Now, planning committee rules were new version was agreed by the council in May 2025, so we're not considering that or proposing any changes to that. What we're looking at is that there's inconsistencies between the other 2 sets of rules, and that this new proposal set out to change that and make them consistent. So that's the basic thing we're doing here. The only other thing I'd like to bring to the council's attention is the thing that brought the main discussion at the Standards Committee, otherwise it was all seen as non-controversial, was item 4 of recommendations, where the committee decided to recommend to the main council that public speaking and responses should be increased in time from 3 minutes to 5 minutes. This caused quite a lot of debate, and rather rarely for this committee, we finished up with a vote on it. But the vote was strongly in favour of increasing the time to 5 minutes, Madam Mayor. So that's the item that perhaps members may wish to debate or consider. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you. Sorry, I did wish to speak under any questions, and my questions would have been, but you didn't see me. But my questions would have been: has Guildford already made a decision, and if so, it would be wise for us to seek to make the same decision, because these are joint consultation, joint constitution issues. So firstly, we'd need to know that. I know the Standards Committee was confused by the fact that it's got all the different versions in here, and it wasn't perfectly clear what we were going to end up with. From the papers that people have got in front of them, it seems to me that the first thing, page 61, looking at the public speaking procedure rules, part 4.9 at page 61 to 64 are being thrown out. That's not what's proposed, even though that's what's in front of us. The proposal is to throw those out. What we're voting to do now is to keep Rule 11 on page 65 to 67 as what we are going to be doing in future. And I may be stupid or something or blind, but I can't see in there where it actually says how much time members have got, because I get thoroughly confused. I turn up thinking I've got 4 minutes to speak and find I've got 3. But I don't think it tells us how many minutes members get, other than obviously the separate rules for. So if you can clarify that, and the recommendation, I don't think the recommendation says the 5 minutes that was agreed by standards. So can we clarify whether the recommendation is going to be changed? Am I right about that or wrong about that as well?
Thank you. Councillor MacLeod, would you like to answer the question contained in that, please?
If I can, perhaps the officers might help here, but firstly, this item has nothing to do with members' speaking time. It's entirely about public speaking time. And we are, the committee, if you look at item 4 of recommendations, we are recommending that public speaking be increased from 3 minutes to 5 minutes. That's item 4 under 2.1. I hope that answers your questions, Jerry.
Thank you, Councillor MacLeod. Any other speakers? No other speakers. Councillor Williams, would you like to say anything?
No, only to just express my huge support for the notion of, you know, expanding that capacity of the public to be able to contribute in terms of questioning this council. And I think, you know, it was a practice that I think was subject to debate in committee, and it's something that I would strongly recommend.
Thank you. Councillor MacLeod, did you wish to say anything
Nothing
further?
to add, thanks, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so we do have a recommendation, 5 parts. You'll all have read it. So when lights show, please vote. That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 5 is statutory officer disciplinary policy and procedure. Are there any questions on clarity? Bless you, bless you. Councillor MacLeod, over to you again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to explain briefly why this is coming forward to the council. The statutory officers are the 3 senior officers in the council.
Councillor MacLeod, do you have a seconder?
Oh,
sorry.
Sorry.
Councillor Williams.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Over to you.
The statutory officers are the 3 senior officers of the council, and fairly obviously they're the officers who would deal with any disciplinary member issues in terms of any other member of staff. But when it comes to statutory officers themselves, you obviously outside people have to be brought in and an outside group set up to deal with it. And this set of proposals explains all of that. The thing I will add actually was that there's a very good discussion about this at the Joint Standards Committee. And there was a member from Guildford who wasn't a councillor, it was one of the independent members who happened to have a lot of experience in this area. He had actually, previously as a councillor, sat on these types of committees. And his concern that, although basically he thought the procedure rules were very good, his concern that they should be sufficiently fair to the senior officers, particularly in terms of timing, because some of the procedures implied that the whole thing would take a long time. And I think that's been tightened up under what was done since. So that's the only thing I want to add, Madam Mayor. Other than that, it's quite a complex matter that the senior officers procedure. You can see it's quite wrong. It's quite detailed. If any people want to ask any questions about it, by all means do. But we are recommending these new procedures to the council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, do you reserve your right to speak?
Yeah, reserve my right.
Thank you. Are there any speakers? No. Councillor Williams, would you like to use your right?
No, that's fine.
And nothing to,
Nothing to add,
No.
Madam Mayor.
so we have a resolution with 5 parts, and again, you will have read it. So when lights show, please vote. That too is carried unanimously. Thank you. So we come now to agenda item number 6, which is the animal welfare motion submitted by Councillor Williams. Do you have a seconder, Councillor Williams?
Bill.
Councillor Juice. Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, in recent years, this council has become increasingly cognizant of animal welfare issues in the decisions that it takes. It's been evident, for example, in our approach to licensing. For example, the decision to ban pets as prizes at events on council land, and also in terms of our growing focus on biodiversity, habitat protection, and the responsible management of our green spaces. Now, underlying those decisions is something which I believe we all hold to be self-evident, that cruelty, mistreatment, or neglect of any other living creature is something no reasonable member of this council would wish to tolerate. And that principle, that compassion should guide our actions, is not controversial, I think. But what is important is that it is applied consistently, that it is applied coherently and transparently across all areas of the council's work. And that's precisely what this motion seeks to achieve. The proposal is not about creating new layers of bureaucracy, a new strategy, nor about duplicating existing legislation. But the notion of an animal welfare charter is about providing a clear ethical framework grounded in the internationally recognised 5 freedoms to ensure that animal welfare considerations are embedded in what we already do in licensing and enforcement, in the management of council land, and where relevant, in planning, procurement and public engagement. It allows us to say clearly and publicly that animal welfare is not an afterthought, but a guiding principle. It's also important to stress that this motion did not arise just in isolation. It wasn't just something that, you know, I dreamt up. And it goes back to the days when I was the portfolio holder for environment and sustainability. Nor did it actually come from one political grouping. The idea of bringing forward an animal welfare charter arose directly from a conversation with a councillor who's not here this evening, but Conservative councillor Lauren Atkins, who was particularly concerned, understandably concerned, by reports of the use of catapults against swans. And swans are not only legally protected, they're among the most visible and vulnerable wildlife in our borough. And quite simply, they are part of what makes Waverley such a special place, and they deserve to be valued and protected. I've also discussed animal welfare concerns with other councillors across the chamber. Councillor Kika Mirrlees raised with me some serious concerns relating to animal suffering within the borough, including following a recent and very distressing incident involving a deer. And I know that the portfolio holder for Environment and Sustainability, Councillor Juice, has long held strong views on the importance of animal welfare and environmental stewardship. So therefore, you know, it's a genuinely cross-party issue, an area where we can, as a council, and should, as a council, come together. Waverley is fortunate to have an extraordinary natural environment, ancient woodland, rivers, wetlands, commons, meadows, lakes, supporting a remarkable range of wildlife, from bats, badgers and hedgehogs to swans, pollinators and amphibians. And we've already got strong policies on biodiversity, trees, woodlands and pesticide use. And this charter builds on those foundations, brings clarity and coherence to our ethical commitments, and importantly, it aligns with our declaration of a climate and ecological emergency, recognising that animal welfare and healthy ecosystems are inseparable. And looking ahead, the motion proposes that this charter, and you can see a kind of exemplar of what the charter would look like as an appendix to the motion, that this charter to be put forward should be put forward for adoption by the new unitary authority, ensuring that these principles are not lost but carried forward through local government reorganisation. And in closing, Madam Mayor, this motion asks us to do something which is both simple and profound, to state clearly and collectively that compassion matters, that how we treat animals reflects our values as a council, and that Waverley Borough Council is committed to promoting humane treatment and respect for all living beings. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Juice, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll speak now, if I may,
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
You may.
Thank you. I'm delighted to second the proposal of this animal welfare charter brought forward by my predecessor, Councillor Steve Williams. It aligns with a core strategic priority of Waverley Borough Council, a more sustainable borough, and will bring about positive changes of attitude to ensure greater respect for the local environment and the animals who inhabit it. It is important to re-establish the relationship between humans and animals. For too long, it has been unequal to the point where animals have been exploited and abused, and people have turned a blind eye. I also welcome the exemplar animal charter that has been presented, particularly in regards to public education and engagement. Soon to be married to a citizen science officer, I understand firsthand the need to educate people to challenge common misconceptions about keystone species. In that vein, I highly recommend all members to read Endless Forms by Syrian Sumner to enable them to take a more sympathetic position to wasps, for example, and understand their pollinator and antibiotic benefits. The Charter is a helpful complementary document to the existing Biodiversity Action Plan that communicates a clear position to residents that we take seriously the ill treatment of animals in our borough and will protect them, drawing on and utilising existing relationships, policies and frameworks. I commend this charter to Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just allergic to wasps and bee stings, okay? However, are there any speakers? Councillor Hyman.
I don't think being allergic to wasps is an excuse, is it? And what does the book say? I wouldn't have thought so. Sorry, Madam Mayor, but yes, having strong policies, of course, has to be matched by the council's day-to-day decision-making. This is obviously a proposal, a motion that none of us are going to oppose. It is good. I hope everybody votes in favour of it. But it should be noted on page 122 of our last set of documents where the motion is under the appendix from the Example Animal Welfare Charter. It tells us that the Charter builds upon foundations extending the Council's ethical and environmental commitments, and it goes on to say that it also complements the Council's statutory role legal responsibilities under the Animal Welfare Act, etc., and the Conservation of Habitats and Species Regulations 2017. And you know, I've said it before and I'll say it again, that into April 2018, the landmark ruling under People Over Wind did confirm that the approach taken by Natural England and councils, including this council, to evade complete and honest assessment of the impacts on endangered species is unlawful, has been, and the council has not changed its ways. Still continues to screen out the need for assessment, as at tomorrow evening's planning committee meeting. So we will obviously be looking forward to seeing the positive change in attitude, hopefully before tomorrow evening, that Councillor Deuce talks about. There is no excuse for ignoring the law, and the law has been made perfectly clear. And so that we're not accused of being hypocrites and putting through a motion tonight, which we just don't back up with action, please ensure that we are acting in accordance with these fine proposals in our future decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Spence.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I very much welcome both the sentiments and the proposed charter that we have in front of us, acknowledging, of course, it's for the executive to put before us. A question, or let's say not so much a question, but as I read it, it does commit the council, or potentially would commit the council, to various actions. Particularly, I look at on page 124. It would be pledging us to integrate animal welfare into all relevant policies, contracts and planning decisions. So I guess the question I have is whether there are any financial implications of us agreeing this. And I think that's something I would hope that the executive might look at, and then if it comes to council, give us that information, because I think that's an important aspect. It doesn't necessarily change my perspective, but it's information I think we should have available. Thank you.
Thank you. I have two other speakers, Councillor Martin, followed by Councillor Follows. Oh, I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. So Councillor Martin first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I'm not all that keen on adopting charters like this. This is very much the kind of charter and this motion that I'm partly in favour of, maybe even generally in favour of, but in my view, it goes far too far with what we are expected to do as good citizens or as a local authority. The 5 freedoms sound great, but if accepted, what are we committing ourselves to? Number 1 is freedom from hunger and thirst, and we must provide access to fresh water and a diet to maintain full health and vigour. Well, how are we supposed to do that for all of the animals in the borough? For instance, I'm not that keen on the huge expansion of foxes in my area since I arrived 40 years ago, especially when they attack chickens and livestock and sometimes my food bins when they're put out for collection. At what point do animals become vermin? I had a rat and mouse problem last year and took action to eradicate them. Is that in conflict with this policy? Apparently, far from eradicating them, I am supposed to ensure that they have fresh water and a diet to maintain their full health and vigour. And how then am I supposed to actually protect my rats and mice from foxes who do get at them as well? Councillor Deuce mentions wasps. Well, I happen not to like wasps, rather like you, Madam Mayor. Am I supposed to nurture them when they're in the wrong place in my house? And what do I do about slugs? I know we could have a whole debate about slugs, but I have to say, my concern is, what's the demand on the council taxpayer funds here? Then what am I expected to support from this endeavour? And by the way, what will become the role of our pest control officers? Are they to be re-educated into what they should do with the pests in line with this particular charter? Number 2 is freedom from discomfort, giving shelter and a comfortable resting area. Well, I have to say, I put up bird nesting boxes in my garden and I provide seeds and appropriate bird food. I love the little wrens that feed on the seeds from my morning toast. I encourage hedgehogs, but I'm much less keen on rats enjoying my compost heap. Again, what are the implications for the council taxpayer from all this? What is the proposed cost? Number 3 is freedom from pain, injury or disease by prevention or rapid diagnosis and treatment. Goodness, that seems to be an enormous commitment. And if adopted, what are we actually committing ourselves to, particularly financially? Number 4 is freedom to express normal behaviour by providing sufficient space, proper facilities and company of the animal's own kind. Well, goodness, again, this sounds to me like a huge commitment, far beyond what we might reasonably be expected to do. I'm all in favour of good management of our council-owned lands and taking reasonable measures to help wildlife. I'm also in favour of good management of our hedgerows and our waterways. I'm in favour of trying to ensure we have natural highways for animal movement. But this freedom goes further than I'm happy to say yes to. And then finally, number 5 of this is freedom from fear or distress by ensuring conditions and treatment which avoid mental suffering. And I don't like the thought either of young lads with catapults attacking swans. But how do we ensure that all these things are avoided? So I want to take reasonable and cost-effective steps to avoid animal cruelty. I would like to see more focus on best endeavours, doing what's reasonable within the context of local conditions. But I think this charter goes too far. I am not in any way anti-wildlife, but I'm afraid that I'm not able to support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miralles. Apologies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think a reasonable response is what we're looking at, actually. I mean, honestly, Councillor Martin, when you talk about, I think it's just silly, some of the stuff you've come out with, just seriously silly. Of course, you fully know that if you have a huge amount of rats ripping everything up and causing, disease and going through your, so you have to take proper action towards that. But we have forms of poison now, which sound horrible, but certainly ways that you can put them to sleep in an effective way by putting rat poison down. There are different ways now of killing animals. We don't want to be doing it, obviously, but we have to manage it. We live side by side with other creatures. And I think that this is just about, I think for most people, as you say, we all believe that animals that we live with and domestic animals as well should be looked after properly. I have horses, I have a cat, I have always been involved with animals. I'm very keen on animal welfare. And one of the great things about this is that I'm very keen to hear that we should be going, or could be going into schools and educating people much more about how we look after our domestic pets and also the wildlife that we live side by side with. When we had this horrendous thing happening up at the Farnham Park, which I spoke to Radio Surrey about with Nick the Ranger, it was where people had gone into the park, despite the fact that it says, be careful, there are wild deer here, they do get in. Animals, some of the deer had got caught and they were attacked by dogs that haven't been trained properly or kept on a lead. One deer couldn't jump out. It was trapped on the fence and they ripped its genitals off. You may not want to hear that. Now, the problem we had there was Nick the Ranger didn't have any access to a humane killer, which is something I would like to see us put into place for somebody like that when you've got so many animals around. He had to take that animal, 2 of them, thrashing around in pain, put them in the back of his car, go down to the vet and ask them if they could possibly euthanize because we didn't have the money for him to pay for it. He had to give them some biscuits. Honestly, this is what we're looking at. We're looking at how to protect animals properly, how to educate people, animals properly that live and work in our borough. And I think that it's a wonderful thing that actually Councillor Williams has brought this in place. And again, I think it's also, you know, when we talk about wasps and things, they are hugely important in terms of pollination and stuff like that. So I think you have to have a proper and not what I think is a rather silly response to what is being offered up here. And I absolutely support it. And I thank you, Councillor Williams, and I thank you, Councillor Juice, for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Follows and then Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There is always, with this sort of debate, the tendency to drift into extremes, and so I hope to try and bring it in a minute back to a position where the exec can do something. No book on earth is going to make me love wasps. I can't ever do it. I'm sure I'm not the only one here. And I'm sure Councillor Martin's concerns about putting the cart before the horse are absolutely valid, but we'll make sure we look after that horse. And we'll make sure that its welfare is excellent. I think Kika makes a great point in the sense that you could take this to an absurd extreme and not make the distinction between animals, wildlife, and clearly defined pests and how they are addressed by our services and by others. I consider every part of this charter to be a worthy aspiration, but there are obviously elements here that, to respond to Councillor Spencer's question, are quite properly executive function, and they're executive function because they deal with things such as the financial impact to the council. So I'll just conclude briefly by saying that the executive will take very seriously all aspects of what this charter is proposing, and in our sections that are executive function, we'll make sure that we give any financial considerations of this charter a full and proper evaluation before anything is put into place. But I would just like to say on the record that I hope to see some version of this put into place because I think it's the right and proper thing to do. And in a very rural borough that we live in is something that I think many of our residents will expect of us and welcome of us. And I can think of multiple examples throughout our borough where I've had residents report to me issues of animals in distress, where us having a more defined and proper protocol with officer guidance and access to resources would have helped those issues be resolved more quickly and more humanely for everybody involved. So I do welcome all of the aims of this policy, and the executive will do its best to implement it in a reasonable and cost-effective way. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't going to speak on this, but I've been struck by everyone who's spoken so far in different ways. I couldn't agree more with Councillor Mirrlees. I couldn't agree more with the notion here that we are proposing to write a charter. This isn't the charter. We're not voting on this being the charter. We're voting on whether to go ahead with one. And I share the concerns expressed by Councillor Martin and Councillor Spence about the costs. And I'm sure that's something that will be taken seriously as the things develop. You know, there's no doubt in my mind that nature in the wild is a cruel place. But I've read this and I've listened to Councillor Martin, and I can't honestly believe that we've read the same document, because this document does make the distinction between domestic, farmed and wild animals. Nowhere does it say that we have to go out and take care of every beast that lives in the borough, whatever its nature or condition. It says quite the opposite. For me, our role is to respect nature. It is cruel, but our role is not to create or amplify that cruelty. It is to be at best neutral, if not humane, in our treatment of nature. So I was disappointed to hear Councillor Martin turn his remarks into a stand-up routine. I couldn't care less about his toast, but I do care about nature.
Thank you, Councillor Barker-Lomax.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I very much welcomed this motion. I do understand Councillor Martin's concerns about having to care for rats and wasps, etc. I think we might be able to square the circle by looking at the key principle of the underlying freedoms, which apply to animals over which we have control and not to wild animals. And I think that's where we can solve the tension between the two houses here. So it doesn't apply to wild animals. Other laws apply to cruelty to animals. But here we're talking about animals under our control, like farmed animals, pets, research zoos, etc., or trapped wild animals. So as long as the overall motion respects that, then I would back it.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, it's been a really interesting debate, this one. And I thank Councillor Williams for bringing the motion. I support it. However, I was wondering what powers we actually have. I was listening to Radio Surrey just, I think, the other day. I think it was either on Monday morning, and I was listening to a concerned resident who lives near the mill in Elstead. and I think anyone who knows that area, and there's horses in a field, which a lot of local residents have been concerned about. And there was the resident was talking about it, and then they had somebody from the RSPCA coming in, and he looked at it and inspected it and was talking, and they have 5 tests of whether there is actually any cruelty going on here, even though you might think, well, these are horses in a field and it's wet and they've got nowhere to go. But the RSPCA came along and then and assessed the situation, even though it didn't look very comfortable to the untrained eye. But the RSP officer said, this is absolutely fine. It meets the 5 tests, which the RSPCA have. So, how much power does an authority, does the council have to intervene in these kind of situations? So that's just probably my question of it. But obviously, on the principle of it, I think it's absolutely great. Thank you.
Thank you. So no more speakers. Councillor Williams, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank colleagues for across the chamber for what's been a largely supportive debate. I won't respond to Councillor Hyman's opportunity to raise a specific legal issue which has been previously discussed with legal advice provided, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But a number of points. But there was another rabbit hole that was actually created by Councillor Martin during this debate. It was a slightly disingenuous contribution, I think, with some red herrings raising concerns about bureaucracy and cost. And, we are being realistic here. I'd like to assure Council that this is introducing no new enforcement regime, no new statutory duties, no new layers of administration. It's a guiding framework, not an operational programme, and one that supports good, sensible, measured decision making rather than complicating it. It does not preclude habitat management. It does not preclude humane management of biodiversity and pest control that needs to be humane, as Councillor Miralles pointed out. There's been some sort of suggestion that the Charter is largely symbolic. Well, I would suggest that actually symbols matter, particularly where they shape culture, guide expectations, and give clarity to officers, members, and residents alike. This Charter gives us a shared reference point for decisions that are already being taken. Councillor Spence, I think, raised a very valid point regarding potential financial implications, and Councillor Merriweather picked up that point. And it is precisely because there could theoretically be some financial implications here, not particularly significant in reality, I think, that this motion calls on the executive to bring forward an animal welfare charter rather than being prescriptive about the nature of the charter. And that's why what was provided with the motion is an exemplar, the kind of charter that could be brought forward by the executive. I imagine the charter that will be brought forward by the executive will be not dissimilar to that, but one is not in a position at this stage of providing a blueprint. The important thing is the principle of this. And what's been striking in the debate has been how much common ground there is, because, whatever political differences we might have, I think that within this council there is a shared humanity. There's a shared understanding that cruelty, neglect, or mistreatment of animals has no place in Waverley, and that compassion is not a weakness but a strength in public service. So, Madam Mayor, adopting this charter allows us to say calmly, clearly and collectively that how we treat animals reflects who we are as a council and as a community. So I'd urge members to support this motion.
Thank you. Well, the motion is that, I know. There's a bet on here, I think. That we call upon the executive to do the 4 bullet points on the end of the motion. So I won't read them because you will already have read them. Councillor Martin.
Madam, I'm a little confused because on page 121 of the old agenda, which I think is unchanged into the new one, there is on the documentation here, it says motion, and it says Waverley Borough Council supports the internationally recognised 5 freedoms for animal welfare. And then there's another section which recognises its own role in promoting animal welfare. That's part of the motion. And it calls upon the executive to do various things. So are we not voting for all of this, which is what the paperwork says?
We are.
So we are now saying we are supporting the internationally recognised 5 freedoms for animal welfare. That's what the motion says.
We are.
Right, thank you.
As a point of clarity, can I just ask whether the bottom bullet point, whether the Shadow West Surrey Council will be able to adopt something before vesting day? Because I can't vote for it, even though I support the principle. If it's not possible, I can't vote for it.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. We have had the debate. We're moving to the vote. Councillor Pollers, you didn't want to add anything?
I believe West Surrey Unitary in shadow form could adopt it as a recommendation prior to vesting day, that it would have to adopt formally once constituted, but that's probably more technical than is helpful here.
Thank you. So we have had the debate. We'll move to the vote. When lights show, please vote. So that is 26 in favour, 3 abstentions and 1 against. It is carried. And at 8:03, we end the meeting. Thank you.